Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. In this series, we're aiming to help business owners, business leaders, and fellow coaches by sharing our experience and the experience of our guests who've coached people all around the world in all of different sectors and industries that you can imagine. So, very little more to say other than do please now sit back, relax, and enjoy this edition, and look out for a special offer for our loyal audience at the end of the programme. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Coaching Conversation. Our topic today is creating a culture of excellence. I'm really pleased to say that I'm joined today by my guest, Kyle McDowell, all the way from Tampa in Florida. Is going to talk us through his experience of creating cultures of excellence. Kyle, welcome to the Coaching Conversation. And for our audience, tell us a bit about your background and how you now find yourself as an author, a coach, a speaker, particularly on the subject of creating a culture of excellence.
Well, Graham, first of all, man, thank you for having me. It's really great to be with you. You're doing some really important work. And anytime I get a chance to share kind of my thoughts on these topics, it's really an honor. So I'm grateful. Thank you for the chance. And you said a word in there or a couple of words in there that got my attention because it's really true for me. It's like how I found myself in these situations or in the roles that I'm in today. And it is kind of a twisting, turning path that got me to this point. But so I was in the big corporate world for about 30 years. And I led, before I exited in 2019, I led really massive organizations, tens of thousands of employees. For some context, in my last two roles, I had about 30,000 employees, led multi-billion-dollar P&Ls. And on the surface, like, I think it's safe to say I checked all the air quote success criteria that I had established for myself early in my career. But what I didn't account for, man, was the level of apathy that would become such a loud voice in my head over the course of the last decade or so. And that's what really, when we say found myself in the situation I'm in, that's what drove where I am today. So I was in this race for about 20 years when the apathy became so strong. I just had to start asking questions. It's like, is there a better way? Because Graham, for me, when you're leading organizations this size and you wake up and you dread going to work, the Sunday scaries are like a real thing for me. I just realized that I was kind of on autopilot. And when you wake up and dread going to the environments that you had a very, very influential role in creating that environment, it's kind of a gut punch. It's like, if you don't like the environment that you're in, you better look in the mirror, because I was the one that was creating these cultures. And I just realized that when my marriage was on the rocks and ultimately ended in a divorce, and I wasn't a very happy person, my health wasn't where it needed to be, I needed to make some changes. And I was a pretty lucky guy at that point in my career that I was able to step away for a month or two, not knowing what my next move was going to be, but I wasn't like independently wealthy and I could step away and just like sip Mai Tais on the beach. I had to get back in the workforce. But I made a promise to myself, if I were to go back or wherever I would ultimately land next, I was going to do things very differently. And for me, I stumbled across what's known as principle-based leadership. It's not a new term. It's not a new approach, but it was new to me. And essentially that just involves us establishing our principles. And our principles, by definition, a principle is a fundamental truth. It's our foundation for a system of beliefs. And I just had this hunch that if we can get our teams to align around these fundamental truths, these principles, then we have a better chance of having a fulfilling existence. We have a team, not just a bunch of people with the same badge. I created these principles one evening before I was going to meet with the top 50-ish leaders of the organization I was with at the time. And it changed my life. It changed the organization. I watched bosses transform into leaders. And all of this kind of culminated in me writing my USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestseller. And I found my purpose. You say, you found yourself where you are. The book, Begin With We, was When I started writing it, I said, if I sell 1,000 copies, I will have checked the box. Well, we're doing about 1,000 copies a week now. And it's done
Very
this over the right. It's done this over the course of the last couple of years, and every month seems to eclipse the previous month or right around the same. And I don't share that for vanity's sake, Graham. I share that because I'm not the only one. I'm convinced now. I'm not the only one who's hungry for a better way, and I'm convinced I've found it. Um, so that's what fuels me today, my man.
I believe there are many senior executives in many corporations around the world who have climbed the greasy pole, and when they get to the top, they're not as happy as they thought they might be.
Amen.
And it takes a lot of courage or stupidity to give it all up and find something else. And I salute that courage. I salute that bravery. I can relate to it wholeheartedly. So now, looking back at looking at what we're talking about today, creating a culture of excellence, who are the kinds of clients that you take this knowledge to, you take this insight to?
A great question. And there are really two camps I found myself being approached by and working with. And candidly, I try to avoid this first group. And it's the group that is they're looking to launch an initiative. They want to check some boxes. They want to feel good about bringing some author in or a guy that's, that has a resume similar to mine or experiences similar to mine, and they feel they can outsource this transformation. It doesn't work that way, as you know, based on your experiences, right? You can't just say let's flip a switch and we're going to be a high functioning, less toxic organization. It just doesn't work that way. So I try to avoid those, but I have to say probably half of all of the prospects, if you will, that I interact with or come in contact with are going about it for the wrong reasons. The other side of that coin is where I get my fuel and my energy and motivation from. It's the group that says, we want a better way. We're committed to a better way. We're not exactly sure how to get there. And that's where I just really, really hunker in and say, first we got to say what we stand for. What are our principles? How do we want to hold each other accountable? What are the things, the irrefutable truths that we will hold ourselves to, regardless of the environment, regardless of the adversity, regardless of what's going on in our world? But then it's incumbent upon the leaders to walk that walk. We can't just talk it. So when I'm fortunate enough to partner with organizations, and it's usually mid to senior level leaders, but not always. One of my favorite clients is a multi-billion-dollar firm out of Virginia, where an HR assistant reached out, and she
Wow.
just said, yeah, man. And I'm so proud that I'm proud of her. Number one, that she because many of us, and you could probably relate to this, many of us are waiting. We're waiting for someone in the ivory tower to say, here's what's going to make your work more fulfilling, or here's the new initiative that's going to drive, the type of environment and the culture that we want. And she didn't wait for that. She reached out to say, listen, I think there's a chance inside of this of our teams, this big organization for change. So it comes from all what, it's industry agnostic. It is company size agnostic, but it's really rooted in people that are genuinely chasing a better way. They want more fulfillment. They want to reconnect with the passion that I think all of us bring to the workplace when we first enter it, but for a variety of reasons is pulled out of us throughout our career paths.
And is there anything common, particularly about the second group that you mentioned? Is there anything common about the problems they're facing, the solutions they're seeking, or the reasons for change?
Yeah, man, it's I would categorize that as well into two categories. The first is um, there tends to be a me versus you mentality from the leaders, more appropriately the bosses. And what I mean by that is, if I could just get them to do this, we'd be better. If I could just get my team to focus on that, we would be better. When I've found, and I am exhibit A, to say, when you look in the mirror as a leader and say, what am I doing to drive this behavior? What role am I playing in the culture that we're a part of today? And asking those questions is obviously incredibly important, but answering it authentically and honestly, and setting your ego aside and being a little bit vulnerable to say, yeah, man, I played a role in this. And I'm the person in the position to pull us out of this. So the common thread is first is this like this recognition that there's a problem and I've asked the tough questions is kind of category one. The second category is um, we know that we've got opportunities and it can come in the form of engagement surveys, employee satisfaction surveys, any number of ways where this is kind of bubbled up and they're like, all right, it's time to do something. I don't know what, but it's time to address this. They recognize there's a gap. They recognize that there's a better way. They just don't know what that better way is, and they're looking for honest help. And I like to say to people, Graham, look, I don't have the answers. One of the questions I get a lot is, all right, Kyle, if we bring you in for a keynote or you do some leadership development or you work with our leadership team, our senior team, like how long until we're where we could call ourselves a culture of excellence? And my answer is, I don't know. I don't know because I can't quantify your commitment. I can't quantify how you're going to react when the chips are stacked against you the first time you're challenged by a member of your team. Because historically, we've all seen that boss that says, in one way or another, they say, because I said so. And that doesn't fly in a culture of excellence. So it's those that are open to change. They just don't know how to get there. And that's where we have a lot of fun.
And what, in your mind's eye, is a culture of excellence? What does it look
So
like? What does it feel like?
great question because when I first started this work and wrote the book, I never took the time to genuinely and literally describe a culture of excellence, and I've landed on that. So Kyle's definition, it's mine alone. You can disagree with it or think there's value, and it's essentially this: it's an environment void of fear and rich in collaboration, where authentic leaders and engaged and empowered employees align on three things: our personal goals, our professional goals, and the organizational goals. Seems pretty simple, right? But when you insert that aligning on personal goals, it takes people to some uncomfortable waters. And by that I mean, and I don't mean to come across naive. So let's just pretend I am a manager at a coffee shop, and I'm not naive. The team that I lead, that's probably not their career. It is a step in their career. It's a job on a way to something different. And people look at that and they're like, well, I have part-time employees or people are just here to get a paycheck. And I got no problem with that. But when you make an overt effort to say, hey, Graham, I know you've been with us a month or so and you're our newest barista, but what do you want to do in this world, man? What's next for you? How do you want to leave your mark on this world? I think it's a human obligation when we're in a position of authority or we're a quote unquote boss. It's one thing to say here are the SOPs, like the X's and O's of how you fulfill a customer's order for coffee, right? We train that. But if I express interest in what motivates you, what inspires you, what is going to put you in the best position for your next step, whatever that is, recognizing I'm going to lose you if I help you on this next step. When you make that investment, the time, just the time and the care, doesn't require a financial investment. It's like, I want to know what makes you tick, what inspires you, what's next for you, and I want to help you get there. When you have those conversations, man, you think they work less hard? You think they're less committed to our little mission, our journey inside the coffee shop? For now, of course not. When you show interest in their growth, their development, it's paid back in a form of loyalty and trust that I think is otherwise really difficult to obtain.
Yeah, I think in my experience, there's no question that if people believe they work in an organization that cares about them at the individual level, they'll give back more. Now, that doesn't translate from a straight line to the P&L account,
Right.
but the cumulative effect is good for everybody.
So why
And
is it so void then, man? In your experience,
why
like
is
if
it so void?
we acknowledge, right? If we show that care, we make that investment of time to those we lead. Why? It's so obvious, right? It's simple, actually. Simple's not easy, but why is it so missing in your experience?
Time. I think most managers, leaders, directors, business owners are short on time. I think they're very focused on results, financial results typically, but not exclusively. And the people piece sits somewhere further back in the list of agendas. And if you've got a bigger team, if you've got a larger organization, you can't do that yourself. So you've got to create a culture of all the people that report to you and all the people who report to them and blah, 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 blah. You've got to cascade this thing. And that's hard.
Very.
It's hard. And I'm pretty sure we're going to start talking about how to do that in a minute. But why don't we do that? Because it's hard. And I think it's also relatively new. There has been a long time managerial control and command view that that's how stuff gets done. I'm the boss. I tell you, you do. That's it. Thanks
That's
very
that.
much.
That's that. Yeah.
And whether it's a lack of enlightenment, whether it's a lack of generosity, whether it's a generational shift, I'm not really sure. But I think the fundamental piece is time. And do I make the time to create that culture, to do it myself, or don't I? And I think so many people are just short time.
Yeah. When I hear that, by the way, I agree. I agree 100%. And that's the wild card when someone asks how long, like, what is this journey going to look like? It boils down to your investment of time, how you spend that time. And I was no different, man. I don't want to come across Pollyannish here. I was no different. Like for me, the focus the first 20 years of my career was always on results are not here. How do I get those results where I need them? When I should have been saying results aren't here. How do I partner with the person who's under delivering? How do I partner with the team? Because I truly believe I mentioned it earlier, but I'll go there again. It's like if someone's underperforming or a culture's not where it needs to be, or just something is missing, the first question has to come from the leader to the leader. What role am I playing in this situation? And more often than not, we find ourselves recognizing the need for change, but I'll get to that later, or I'll wait for some other initiative from higher up. So when I hear someone say, I don't have time to do these things, I acknowledge that, but why don't you have the time? What are you focusing on that is more important than the development of your people, which ultimately will lead to those outcomes that we're chasing? So it's a kind of a catch 22. Do I focus on the results or do I focus on the people that help to deliver the results? And I think the latter, while it absolutely requires more time, effort, and commitment, and it's hard, especially when you just want to say, because I said so, when you're the boss, we're inclined to do that from time to time.
And I think
Um,
that
that's
I
the problem.
said so piece reflects also on it's my responsibility. I've got to fix this problem.
Yeah.
I've got to take responsibility for this and I've got to do this so it's command and control. I've worked out what the problem is. It's not enough sales. The margins are too thin. We need a new product. Whatever it is.
It
And
is.
then it's my job to get the guys to do those things.
Yeah.
And that's where this gap gets either created or extended because actually you don't know all the answers. You
Right.
can't know all the answers, and you need to be much more able to engage with others, particularly in a really big business. You need to be able to engage a large number of other people in finding that answer, but they do need to find it quickly.
Quickly and in a way that is sustainable, I think is where we're
Yeah.
so inclined to jump to the solution because that's what we're paid to do. But I think when we get out of this, put that fire out mode and get into the let's grow mode, it takes longer, it requires more work, but ultimately you end up in a scenario where you can almost finish each other's sentences. You don't have to have this over the shoulder approach, this micromanagement approach that so many of us were kind of brought up in the corporate world to learn and live and replicate. I'll just tell you, man, having implemented these principles in a number of organizations as both kind of a consultant as well as the guy responsible, and with a leadership role inside of the organization, it becomes execution becomes an afterthought in many ways because
Mhm.
we're now subscribed to the same standards. We hold each other accountable to these same standards, and we have a lot more fun in the process. And I know it sounds naive and it sounds like too good to be true, but I assure you, it's possible. There is a better way.
No, I've seen it. I've been part
Have
of it.
you?
But yeah. I understand where you're going from. And one of the biggest issues at the early stages of this is people accepting the need to make themselves vulnerable and to open up to criticism, to open up to different points of view, to recognize that they're an imperfect human being just like the rest of us. And that for many leaders, that they find that a step too far, in my opinion.
Why? Why do you think that is?
Uh, self-preservation, perhaps.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, when you move towards a culture of excellence, as you've defined it, what are the milestones? What are the things that people start to see that are different, or they see that say, "Hey, things have changed around here." What would they look like?
You hear it and you see it. Literally, you hear it and see it. And by that, I mean, so I'll give a couple of examples. So when I first introduced the 10 W's, the principles that we're talking about, that are the foundation of the book and really of a culture of excellence, instead of me evangelizing the principles and saying, "Hey, Graham, listen, man, we challenge each other, right?" One of my favorite of the 10 W's, we challenge each other. You start to hear these principles become part of the daily nomenclature. They're part of our vernacular. We use them and lean against them in times of adversity and also times of, when we have success. We can say, "Hey, another example is, one of the principles is we own our mistakes." So let's just say, Graham, we're on the same team. You botched something, you made a mistake, which, as you so brilliantly laid out earlier, we're all human and that's going to happen. I can sit down in front of you and say, "Hey, Graham, listen, we own our mistakes, right, man? So let's talk about that report you submitted that had a couple of errors in it. We own our mistakes. Like, were you aware that these numbers weren't accurate?" And when you kind of diffuse situations because we have this nomenclature, we have these standards to which we've all subscribed, and now they become part of just how we address things, how we approach things. We number one is we do the right thing always. And man, so really quick story. When I first introduced the principles to this $7 billion program, this was back in 2017. The first we is we do the right thing always. Several months later, we were in the thick of a really sticky situation that, admittedly, we had an opportunity to save a bunch of money in a way that would have alienated our 15,000 person workforce. So to be very specific, there was a like a loophole in our contract with our biggest customer that would allow me to not pay people. Long story short, legally we could have not paid our people for a fair, like, 1 day's worth of work. It was like a holiday or something. And I remember getting a phone call from the most senior leader who reported to me, who was on my team, Lori. And Lori called and said, "Kyle, we have a problem with this." Insert that scenario. And she gave me this like 5 minute monologue of all the background. She gets to the end of the monologue and she says, "But I think I know what you're going to say. We do the right thing. So we're going to pay these folks and do the right thing, right?" I said, "You got it, Lori." Conversation over. So they become part of just how we react to things, how we lead. They become part of our cultural and leadership DNA. So you'll hear it. And this is back before video conference is what it is today. Almost all of our remote work was done just with voice, right? We would just have
Yeah.
voice conferences, teleconferences. And I would dial into these calls, uncertain if what I was evangelizing was taking hold or not. And I wouldn't introduce myself. I would just sit quietly. They wouldn't know I was there. And you could hear people using these principles as part of the dialogue. It was really, really fascinating. That's the hear part. The see part is it's got to be conspicuous. So we had 11 locations in that gig that I'm referencing. I would bounce among these 11 locations and I would see signage that I never commissioned, never ordered it, never said, "Hey guys, let's put the 10 We's all over." Never asked for any of that. Bracelets started to show up. I'm wearing "We Embrace Challenge" today. So when it's hard to escape, and I want to juxtapose this with what most companies do with their mission statements. They're sexy words on a wall. No one can recite them, and they don't compel me to behave any differently, more collaboratively, more team oriented, more we oriented. But these are different because these are actionable. These are things that I can actually hold myself accountable to and be clearly called out when I'm not living them, which allows interaction, allows us to be more human. It allows us to say, "Hey, man, we subscribe to this, but you're not living up to this." And those challenges, they have to come peer to peer. They come from team to leader, leader to more senior leader. So when you hear it and see it, it becomes part of our daily routine.
I think that's very interesting. The comparison to, I don't know, mission
I saw
statements
you nod when I said
and
that. I don't mean to cut you off, but I would love your reaction to that.
well, I think we've all been in organizations' head offices where these are plastered all over the wall and all over their subsidiaries' walls. And as you said, nobody can recite them. They don't really mean anything. They're there for, I don't know, visitors. I'm not really sure what they're there for, really.
Makes them feel good, right?
Um, I think people have made bold efforts around things like values, and in some cases that's been very successful. Where they really live their values, and in many ways, what you're describing as the 10 We's is effectively expressing in one sense or another what the values are that drive the business. I think at the end of the day, if you don't, as a leader, if you don't reach out and touch the souls of the people that you're working with, if you don't get their buy-in beyond, I don't know, lip service, if you don't really, then you failed, and you won't achieve a culture of excellence. You won't make deep, lasting, deep-rooted change. It won't happen. And so, going back to mission statements, I think they're a quick fix for not very much at all, really.
Couldn't agree
Um,
more.
if we
Couldn't
look
agree
at the kind of organizations that you work within, do you find international businesses are different to local businesses? Do you find ones with family ownership are different to ones that are public companies? What do you find?
I've not noticed a massive difference from one industry or one size versus another because at the end of the day, we're talking about people. Um, it can get a little more difficult in these massive organizations because there's almost this victim mentality that says, yeah, this is great for my little team or this is great for our little division. But getting those guys, the senior folks of the organization to buy into this, yeah, that's just not going to happen. I scream cop out because there's nobody named leadership. I've never met a person named management. We're talking about people. And I have to be, in full transparency, when my first engagement with a nonprofit made me a little nervous because I felt, well, if this is a nonprofit, there's a different paradigm inside, and perhaps the level of effort and even work ethic inside the nonprofit space might not be super conducive to my thing. And boy, was I wrong. I was just wrong because, and this is what cemented my position that I shared just prior to this, is it's just people. So the nonprofit space was, in my mind, in my experience anyways, been no different from massive organization other than the complexity of the hierarchies and kind of the matrix inside of these companies. It's no different, man. It has to start with someone who's looking for a better way, not just looking for the better way, but they're committed to actually living it every day. Because as you know, talk is cheap. Talk doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I say we're going to build this culture of excellence. Everybody read this book. Everybody subscribe. Wear the bracelets. If you, the leader who's introduced this concept or these concepts, behave the same way you did the day before, it's dead before it even got started. So my point is, you have to make the choice, you have to make the commitment, not once, not twice, every interaction. Because every interaction you'll be tested to hold the standard, and it's easy to slide. It's easy to say because I said so this time, or it's easy to say, yeah, but our back's against the wall, so let's just set that right thing aside to do the right thing. Let's we'll get back to that, but this is real work in front of us. That is, I just feel like that's rooted in human behavior, and walking the walk is the most important element of this transformation that we're trying to start. I can say it all day, but no one's going to believe it if I behave differently.
No, and I believe absolutely the leader, whoever they are, wherever they sit in the organization, the leader trying to bring this change about has to accept that it starts with them. If they're not part of it, if it's something they're doing to people as opposed to doing with people, then it's
Well said.
doomed. It's doomed. Um,
Well,
when you're working with teams, do you have tools that you've honed over the various assignments you've used, or is every assignment unique?
I would say every assignment is unique, but there's usually, so of the 10 principles. So I'll back up and answer the question from the macro and kind of drill down. So the answer is yes. We have other tools. So we have a workbook that accompanies the book that allows participants either on an individual basis or collectively in a team group, a group environment, um, where you're required to kind of reflect, Um, there's a discussion section, and then there's an exercise section for each chapter. And what that allows the participant to do is kind of personalize the content, personalize to say, okay, well, if we number two is we lead by example, let's talk about times where I may not have led by the example that I'm proud to see replicated or one that I would be proud to see played forward. And then they internalize that. And then there's group discussion afterwards to say, what did I learn from this? How can I change my approach? And if we're really lucky, we'll get other people to chime in during the discussion period to say, yeah, man, that's worked for me. Or that's something that I've tried. And boy, this is the resistance I saw. And here's how I overcame it. So that group think, I think, is really, really important. My approach to using the tools, the workbook specifically in this case, is I'll do a little bit of research going into those engagements, and I'll meet with the whoever the most senior leader has assigned to have kind of one-on-one, vulnerable, open, transparent conversations about what's going well, what's not going well. And then I'll cater and tailor my messaging around those areas of the greatest opportunity. So, for example, if they recognize there are two or three principles of the 10 W's that they're really lacking in, I'll go much deeper in those topics and we'll spend more time on the readouts, more time on the discussion, more time on the reflection to either subliminally or otherwise kind of drill down into the areas that are the most pressing. If we're doing really well in a couple over here, let's acknowledge those. Let's pat ourselves in the back and let's make sure that this is something that stays in front of mind because we know it's going well. We know the impact that it's having. But let's also focus on the areas that we're just not where we need to be, and let's go deep on those. And then the follow up thereafter is, depending on the engagement, we'll do monthly webinars where I'll dial back into a call because the first time is usually better in person. But I'll do monthly calls where we'll log in, we'll walk through what they're experiencing now. The principles are kind of out there in the ether in their organization, the challenges they're facing, how to overcome them, and then capitalize on the momentum that they're already seeing.
You mentioned earlier that you don't like to answer the question, how long does it take? But
Yeah,
what's the quickest and what's the longest that you've seen your involvement with a client to install this whole new culture?
it's tough to answer, man, because when I leave, it's up to them. It's up to them, and I'm always available. And as I mentioned, we do these monthly check-ins, um, and you're never there. You know what I mean? You're never there. It's always it's as cliche as it sounds, and I apologize to your audience. It is a journey. It is you make the decision one day, you make it the next day, you're committed over and over and over again. I can't answer how quickly or how long it might take. I'll end my response with this. So I created the principles and I catch myself deviating. I catch myself sliding, which is okay because I'm human. I'm going to make mistakes. And I'd like to think with my teams, those in my business today, as well as those that I work with externally, that when the leader does slide, those around you are going to say, hang on, Kyle, you're being a hypocrite. And be open to hearing that. And just be
Yeah.
open to hearing that. Don't take it personally. Just say, I do subscribe to these. I'm not perfect. And I'm going to stumble from time to time. That's when we get real momentum is to say, hey, man, the boss is actually living the same standards as well. And he wants to be called out when he's not living them. That will absolutely speed up the adoption. But I'd be really, really irresponsible to say that, man, you could be in a place of excellence in 2 months because I just can't quantify how you're going to respond the first time
And
you're in a bad spot.
Carl, it's been great chatting with you. It's been really interesting to get your definition of a culture of excellence. If the audience want to hear more, want to find you, how can they do that?
Well, thank you for that, man. I've enjoyed the chat and I really appreciate the opportunity. So I'm on LinkedIn, basically all social media platforms. At Kyle McDowell Inc. is the handle on most of those. Of course, Kyle McDowell on LinkedIn. My website is kylemcdowellinc.com. And then, of course, the book that we've touched on a number of times is Begin with We 10 Principles for Building and Sustaining a Culture of Excellence. Wherever books are sold, audio, Kindle, ebook, paperback, hardcover, whatever works for you. It seems like Amazon is probably the quickest and easiest place to get it. But yeah, and by the way, I share those social media handles not just as like a vanity thing so people get follows and likes and that nonsense. I use them as genuine communication conduits. So when someone reaches out, I do my very best to reply to every message, or at least acknowledge it. And It's been fun. It's been fun to have those interactions, and I appreciate the opportunity to share it.
Carl, thanks again. And that's it, everybody, for this edition of the Coaching Conversation. See you again next time. So, there you have it, the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you found it useful, and I hope it did what it set out to do. As promised at the beginning of the programme, here is a special offer for you, our loyal audience. If you reach out to me at gwiley@sagedream.com and mention this podcast, we'll make available to you a coaching programme for you and or your team at a 50% discount. So where can you reach us? So it's definitely gwiley@sagedream.com. You can also reach us at the Executive Mindset at sagedream.com, and our website is clearly theexecutivemindset.co.uk. If you enjoyed this, do please leave us with a wonderful rating on Google. We'd really appreciate that. So nothing more for me to say now other than see you again soon.